Okay, all right. So good evening, everybody. For those of you that are on already, happy Monday to you. I hope you've had a great weekend, and I'm really looking forward to this evening's webinar with the one and only Jamie Smart. We've just been having a few technical issues, so I do apologise. I say I have been having technical issues, so I do apologise for us starting slightly later than we had said. So I just want to check that you guys can hear us okay. So I can see online we've got Miriam, Peter, we've got Kelly, we've got Coco, we've got Maine, Alice, Margaret, Nicola, Laura. There's lots of you online already, which is great. If you can just, because of these sound issues we've been having, if you can just post on the thread network community that you can hear me okay. And once we know we can hear you guys okay, then we will get going.
Shall I speak so people can critique my levels of echo and feedback as well?
Probably a good idea. Yeah, let's see how you get on with you as well.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here with you. Great to be here with you, Will, and great to be here with everyone tonight.
So Jamie's good. I'm not. So I'm going to try and talk as little as possible.
Well, you're in good company because I'm going to try and talk as much as possible, which is generally what I do anyway. So we're all set.
Happy days then. So for the people that that maybe don't know too much about you, and just to give everybody a bit of a heads up, so Jamie is a Sunday Times best-selling author, 2 fantastic books, Clarity and Results, and then also you've got sort of the little book of Clarity, and I'm right in saying there's a little book of Results as well now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It just came out like last month or the month before, so it's very hot off the press.
Okay, fantastic. And in terms of your coaching, so obviously you operate as a coach and operate as an executive coach. So for those of the people that maybe aren't too familiar with your coaching and executive coaching, what is it the transformations that you typically make with the individuals you tend to work with?
Yeah, well, so typically when someone comes to work with me, and funnily enough, I'm in a country spa in Buckinghamshire at the moment, and I'm doing what I call a 3-day intensive with one of my clients. So typically I'll work with people, either have their own businesses or CEOs, run companies, that sort of thing. And typically they're people who are very successful and have got to a certain point in their life and their career, and they've kind of hit a ceiling. And what we do is we basically sit down at the beginning of the session. This is what I did with my client first thing this morning. And I asked them a simple NLP type question, which is, where would you have to be at the end of this 3 days in order for the investment of time and money and all that sort of stuff to be a total no-brainer? Where do you need to be by the end of this? And they'll start making a list, and they'll have stuff on that list like, well, I want to have greater clarity and purpose and direction in my life. I need more confidence. I want to let go of stress and anxiety. There are all kinds of things that people might have on that list, but I'll do a laundry list with them. So we do that typically in the first session. And then as soon as we've done that, I put it to one side and we go in deep. And what I work with them on is really the stuff that we're going to be talking about over the next little while, which is giving them a fresh look at 2 things, basically, who you really are and how your mind works. Because what I find is that most of us have grown up to believe that there's a certain way that life works, and actually it works in pretty much the opposite way that we think it does. So that's what we work on, and so I'll work with them for a couple of days, and then we check in on the list of stuff at the end of it. So can I tell you a story, Will? Just to make this,
Please do.
just to make this more practical. So I was working with this client. So his name's Ian, and he was managing director of a very successful company. And we sat down on the first day of our intensive, and I start going through the list of stuff, and we're working through our first session. And partway through the first session, he starts getting anxious. I said, "What's up?" He said, "Jimmy," he said, "we're gonna need to have a formula for how this is gonna work. I need a formula." This is a very logical guy. So I immediately start getting anxious because I haven't bloody got one. I haven't got a formula. I've just got how I do it. So I'm getting anxious. Then it suddenly occurs to me, well, Jamie, where do you believe your experience is coming from? And I'm like it seemed to me like it was coming from him and my lack of a formula and screwing up and all this sort of stuff. And it suddenly hits me, like the thing I teach, which is you're always feeling your perception moment to moment. It may seem like you're feeling the other person or what happened to you last week or what's going to happen next week or that sort of thing. But you're living in the feeling of what I call the principle of thought taking form in the moment. The moment I see that, I'm like, oh, we're good. And I fall out of all that anxious thinking. Like this took like a half a second. Boom. I'm back in the present. I said, here's your formula. I said, you plus a misunderstanding equals stuck. Because that was his issue. He had hired me because he was stuck in his business, his personal relationships, in his life. He was off track. I said, you plus a misunderstanding equals stuck. He's like, I like it. I said, well, that's only half the formula. Here's the other half of the formula. Because this guy, when I was first working with him, he was like super stressed, like wrinkles in the forehead, stressed. But he said to me, when I was a young man, I used to be very happy-go-lucky and spontaneous and fun and confident and playful and all that sort of stuff. So he tells me that, and I'm like, you? Because he seemed so like heavy to have so much on his shoulders and that sort of thing. And I said, here's the second part of the formula. You minus a misunderstanding equals fun, spontaneous, playful, happy, loving, connected, confident, clarity. I said, because that's your nature, those qualities are your nature. And the only thing that ever gets in the way of that is a misunderstanding of how your mind works, who you really are. So he's like, great, let's go for it. So that's what we did. Now, here's the interesting thing, Will. So we had made his laundry list of stuff, and then I put it to one side, and we spent the next 3 days working together. The beginning of the third day, we get the list out and look at it. And he starts laughing. And I'm like, what's so funny? Well, as we went through the items on the list, every item, so the goals, either he knew exactly what to do, take it to the next step, or the goal was no longer relevant, or he didn't know, but he was relaxed about it. He's like, you know what? I'll know when I know. All good. With the problems, he'd solved them, or they were no longer a problem anymore, or he knew what he needed to do, or so everything had changed. Same with the changes he wanted to make. So at the core of the work I do with people, Will, is I absolutely know that every human being has the capacity for insight, for realization, for clarity, for well-being, for peace of mind and security within them. It's there within everyone. All I need to do is get all the crap out of the way so that comes to the surface, and then they get the results they've been looking for. So that's what I do. I'm kind of a one-trick pony. That's all I do over and over again. People come to me because they want to make changes. They think they need strategies or techniques or models or whatever, and I just help them clear the clouds out of the way and the sun shines through and they know what to do. So that's it in a nutshell.
Fantastic. And it's one of the things that I actually wrote down when I read I'd read Clarity, but then I reread the little book of Clarity most recently. And I mean, it's a similar formula because I wrote it down because I wanted to keep it. Is clarity equals capacity minus contamination.
Yeah, well, and actually, I took what I'd done with Ian and basically boiled it down into the clarity equation, which is everyone, one way or another, is looking for high performance, more confidence, greater clarity, all that sort of stuff. What I'm suggesting, Will, is that those are actually innate capacities. You know, we talk about confidence like it's something you need to develop, but actually, if you look at 2-year-olds, they're confident as hell, right? Like they they'll, if you go into a group of 3-year-olds and say, who knows how to sing well, every single one of them will put up their hand, right? So confidence is innate. What we learn is stuff that gets in the way of that. So we learn things that cover it up. And the things we learn are just fundamental misunderstandings of how the world works. So as we start to see through those, all of a sudden, all that natural confidence, well-being, security, clarity, peace of mind comes to the surface. And then people discover that they have what they need.
Yeah, as I tend to describe it with regards to when you look at children and you see what children do, particularly toddlers as well. I definitely agree with that. So relating back to your story, so when you sit down with Ian, you said to him, what is it that you want to achieve for these 3 days? So the people that have tuned in today, they are interested in finding out how they can gain clarity and more confidence in their personal and professional lives. So obviously it's a case of understanding that equation, like you mentioned, it's a case of getting rid of the thing that's maybe in the way. So what would you advise in terms of the clarity and the concept? Are they two separate things, or are they combined?
No, they're very, very related. So here's what it is. So I said, my job is kind of helping clear the stuff out of the way that's been getting in the way. And so, of course, quite naturally, people ask, oh, well, how do you do that? How do you clear the stuff out of the way? But the interesting thing is, it's the other way around than you'd think it is. Instead of saying, how do I clear the stuff out of the way? The place to look is what's putting that stuff in the way in the first place. What I'm going to suggest is the thing that's creating that, what I call contaminated thinking, the thing that creates the thinking that has us feel separate from, or anxious, or worried, or stressed, or burdened, or whatever. The thing that creates that is a couple of misunderstandings. First of all, the mistaken belief that we're separate from life. See, we are, each one of us is part of life. It's not that we're individual entities unconnected to life. Like if you look out the window right now, you maybe see birds flying and, trees growing and all that sort of stuff. Well, we're part of that. We're not separate from it. We're part of it. And when we believe that we're separate from it, it also really seems to us like that world out there in the past or the future, or in other people, or in our bank balance, or in results that we want to get, or in our own bodies, or it can really seem like that world out there has power over how we feel. I'll give you an example, Will. So I was working with someone doing a demonstration, actually, in front of a group one night in London. And she said, well, I'm doing a TED Talk in a few weeks, and I'm just super, super nervous about it. And I said, yeah, I get it. I said, so the TED Talk's in 3 weeks. She's like, yeah. And you're super nervous about it. She's like, yeah. I said, where does it seem to you like those feelings of nervousness are coming from? And she said, well, obviously from the talk. I said, well, when's the talk? She said, in 3 weeks. I said, well, how are the feelings getting from the talk in 3 weeks back into the present? How are they getting from the future back to now to make you feel that way? And she looked kind of confused. And I said, well, if you look at it, you'll see that's not possible. You're not feeling the talk. The talk doesn't even exist yet. It won't exist for another 3 weeks. You're feeling your own perceptual processes. Now, that's not an issue. It's totally appropriate for you to feel your own perceptual processes, but that's not the issue. The issue isn't that you're feeling thought in the moment. The issue is you think it's got something to do with that talk 3 weeks from now. And it doesn't. It's got nothing to do with it. You're just feeling the goggles you're wearing at the moment. And this is one of the, I give you a simple metaphor for it. Well, you know, little kids like teddy bears or security blankets or whatever. Well, it genuinely seems to a little kid like their feelings of comfort and well-being are coming from the teddy bear, right? But you and me know that that teddy bear is full of stuffing. It can't be transmitting feelings into a child. All those feelings of comfort and security and well-being, they're coming from the child. None of them are coming from the bear. Well, we get that. That's obvious, right? Of course. But then we think it works differently when it comes to money, or it comes to jobs, or it comes to a partner, or it comes to future achievement, or business success, or whatever, or a talk that we need to give. We think that our feelings really can come from somewhere other than our own perceptual processes, but they can't. And the moment you realize that you're living in the feeling of your perceptions and not in the feeling of things out there, changes the game radically. Because you wake up to the fact that you're part of life and that nothing out there has any power over you whatsoever. It just sometimes looks like it does.
So I completely say everything that you're explaining there, and again, for the purposes of people that are just jumping on, I think Ernest will just jump on. Perception. It's your own perception of an event that creates the reality and what you're feeling. Is my there.
Yeah, I would go even further, Will. You're always living in the feeling of your moment-to-moment perception. You're never feeling anything other than that. That's always what you're feeling. Now, we've all had experience of feeling stressed, or feeling anxious, or feeling worried, or feeling peaceful, or joyful, or happy, or sad, or whatever. And it often seems like those feelings are giving us information about a world out there in space and time that has power over us, the power to make us feel a certain way. But actually, we're always living in the feeling of our own perception. It's and here's the funny thing, Will, it's profoundly useful and valuable. So, for instance, like a simple way of thinking about it is that our feelings are letting us know about the goggles, the VR goggles, virtual reality goggles. Well, it's almost like we're all walking around with a pair of virtual reality goggles. And our feelings are letting us know about the goggles we're wearing in that moment. Sometimes we're wearing happy goggles. Sometimes we're wearing sad goggles. Sometimes we're wearing angry goggles. Sometimes we're wearing creative goggles, blah, 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 blah. So our feelings are always telling us what kind of goggles we're wearing, which is really useful. It's useful to know what kind of goggles you're wearing, because it really looks like our feelings are telling us about what we're looking at, not what we're looking through, not where we're looking from. So it's really useful to have that indicator. So I'll give you a great example. Everyone, when they get angry, gets stupider, right? No one gets smarter when they get angry. Everyone gets stupider when they get angry. But everyone feels smarter when they get angry, right? They feel more intelligent, like they're right. They feel more right about stuff. Those feelings aren't telling you about how right you are. They're telling you about that you're wearing angry goggles when you're angry. Same with peace, if you're feeling peaceful or confident for that matter, your feelings of confidence aren't letting you know about the stuff you're considering. Just like feelings of lack of confidence, they don't know anything about the future. Everyone I know who is a good public speaker can give examples of talks when they were going to go on and they felt totally lacking in confidence. They felt like a fraud, all that sort of thing. Then they go on stage, they do the talk, and it's the best talk of their life. Everyone's got examples of that. So your feelings don't know about the future. They just know about what goggles you're wearing. And this is just such a simple example of a misunderstanding of how our perceptual systems work. What I find, Will, is when people wake up to the truth of how it works, it sets them free.
And in that point, so waking up to the realization of misunderstanding they have, what's the pattern that you notice that misunderstanding tends to be?
Well, the misunderstanding is really simple. We tend to believe that our feelings are giving us information. Well, there are two misunderstandings, actually. The first one is we tend to believe that our feelings are giving us information about whatever we're thinking about. So, and this is kind of a weird one, but when we look around our lives, it really seems to us like we're looking out through our eyes at a world out there. Like our eyes are kind of like windows that we look out of at a world out there. But that's not how it works. This got figured out in the 1850s. The world, like wherever you are, look around the room you're in, okay? You can, I'm sure you can see the room and the walls or wherever you are, your car, wherever you are. And it looks totally real, totally get it. But 100% of that experience is being generated from within your mind. It's what the neuroscientist Anil Seth refers to as a controlled hallucination. That's how our perception works. So for practical purposes, you know, when I finish this webinar, I'll walk over and open the door and my hand will hit the right door handle and that sort of thing. And it looks like I'm looking out through my eyes at a world out there, but in actual fact, your experience of life is being generated from within you, being generated from within you. And that simple misunderstanding right there, that trick of the mind, when people see through that, when they see that the teddy bear isn't giving them the feeling, that the feeling is coming from their own perceptions, that's a game changer for people. So that's one of the misunderstandings. The other misunderstanding is people don't tend to know who they really are. Now, when I say who you really are, you stop and think about it. If you take your hand, you can go, okay, this is my hand, and this is my nose, and this is my head, and these are my ideas, and this is my past, and this is my future. And that all makes sense. This is my body. This is my personality. But you're not your hand. You're the guy who has a hand. You're not your body. You're the one that has a body. You're not your personality. You're the one that's developed a personality. You're not your thinking. You're the one who's experiencing your thinking. So you're not actually the stuff that you're made of. I mean, it's well established that the molecules that your body is made of get recycled like every 7 years. You get a complete atom change. So your body is not the same body you had 10 years ago. It's completely different atoms. So you're not your body. You're the one who is creating an experience of your body. And the implications of this are massive because, well, the two of these realizations together mean you absolutely cannot be a victim of circumstance. It means there's nothing, it means you have nothing to be afraid of. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't wear a seatbelt and, you know, avoid crocodiles and that sort of thing. That's just common sense. But you're capable of so much more than you think because you are so much more than you think. You know, you aren't this physical, you know, meat suit that we're all made of. You're the consciousness that's animating it. And as people see that, it's like it takes a huge amount of the stress and pressure out of life and liberates people to create amazing things and to do what they really want to do and to have the insights and realizations that transform lives. You're still on mute, buddy.
You're saying completely. You're saying what I'm going to say just at this stage is that if anybody does have any questions, if you can add them into the Elite Network community, I'm going to post the group in the chat box. The reason I don't use the chat box for questions, guys, quite simply, is because if we do, then we lose the questions when the webinar finishes. Whereas if we keep them in the Facebook group, then all the questions stay there and we can revisit them and we can post answers to them, and Nicola will be monitoring that. So if you do have any questions, then feel free to ask any there. Kelly said about jumping off cliffs. Yeah, when you're referring to crocodiles and when you're referring to seatbelts, that's what Kelly's referring to, because Kelly's coming on a boot camp that we're doing in September, which involves canyoning, which is jumping off cliffs, which will be interesting. I know she's got a bit of fear around that at the moment.
Yeah, well, I think being afraid of jumping off cliffs is totally rational. That stuff can waste you. But I trust you'll have suitable health and safety considerations taken care of. Will. Good, good. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons. Like, we have common sense about that sort of stuff. Right? And that's another thing that I point my clients to, the fact that if you didn't have an innate source of wisdom and intelligence and common sense, you would have been smucked a long time ago. You would have been, stepped in front of a steamroller or fallen off a cliff or whatever it might be. But you've got incredible, we're built for reality. We've evolved over millions of years to live in this world. And the fact that you're even alive and able to hear this recording means that you come from a long line of ancestors, each of whom managed to survive until breeding age and meet someone to hook up with and have sex at least once, and then bring up a kid to breeding age again. And that happened again and again and again, hundreds of thousands of times in succession. And the fact that you're here today means that you come from that lineage. And so you're capable of way more than you think. For most of human history, the kind of challenges we face to our life and limb were significant, and yet here you are. So, most people, I find, they underestimate who they are and what's possible for them.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, one of the biggest things that so many people are impacted by is their own self-belief. And they have such low levels of self-belief, which has a significant impact on what it is that they believe that they can achieve. A lot of that obviously that's been directed on them and projected on them from various people, from their parents to teachers to a whole host of other people. But yeah, definitely.
Well, here's an interesting thing, Will. Like, it looks to me like self-belief is kind of back to the thing I was saying about you're not your hand, you're not your... If you stop and think about it, if you look at little kids again, little kids, they don't have a whole bunch of self-belief. It's not like they've been going on Tony Robbins seminars so they can learn to walk and that sort of thing. They just don't have the stuff that's getting in the way of doing what they want to do. And it's interesting. I've spoken to loads of really successful entrepreneurs. And what we find is that people who are very successful, their levels of self-belief fluctuate wildly. It's just they don't really give a shit about it. They like, I have some days where I'll wake up and I'll be like, oh man, I'm so useless. I've got no self-belief at all. Like, anyway, what am I doing today? Oh, I'm going to go do this. Okay, I'll go do it. Last week, we did a workshop for youth workers, people who are working with really vulnerable youth, gang members, victims of violence, that sort of thing. Did a workshop called Resolving the Roots of Youth Violence. And so we had like, I don't know, 15 youth workers in the room with us, and then another 20 or 30 live streaming from around the world. And that morning I woke up and I'm like, oh man, I don't know what I'm going to do with these guys. Oh, I'll give you an example. I got, have you come across the Beard Club? There's a company called Dollar Beard Clubs. Is founded by an entrepreneur. Is founded by an entrepreneur called Chris Stoikos a couple of years ago. He grew it from $0 to $15 million in the first 12 months. And he's a big fan of my book, Clarity. So he flew me out he was doing a mastermind event for entrepreneurs in the Hollywood Hills, 10 grand a head thing, had about 70 people there for the weekend. And so he flew me out to speak at it. So the morning of my talk came, and I woke up early in the morning. I'm like, oh my God, I've got nothing to speak to these guys about. They're all way more successful entrepreneurs than I am. What have I got to tell them? Oh my God. So I was so nervous. I'm like pacing back and forth. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be terrible. It suddenly occurs to me where do you believe your experience is coming from? It's like, oh man, I'm not feeling my talk. I'm feeling the goggles I'm wearing. I'm just wearing shitting myself goggles at the moment. Okay. Oh, well, I'll just go do the talk and see what shows up. So I go to do the talk. I ended up telling them what had happened that morning, and we had a great time, and it was a great talk, but my self-belief before doing it had been through the floor. But I'm like, oh, well, I don't care. I'm still going to go do it. I don't really care how I feel. Doesn't matter. Just keep, did it make sense when you were feeling confident and all that sort of stuff? Yeah, well, it probably still makes sense. It's interesting. Well, I was talking to a client, and this is someone who wanted to write a book. And they said, well, I got really inspired and I started writing the book, but then the next day I woke up and I wasn't feeling inspired anymore. It's like, well, when you're feeling inspired, did it make sense to write the book? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, write the book then. They're like, but I'm not feeling it. It's like, well, so what? That's just the weather of your perceptions. It's the weather of your thinking. Like, do you want your success to be dependent on the weather? I mean, like, not if you live in the UK, you don't. Well, the weather, like if you think you need to be. Here's the funny thing, Will. I was doing a talk for being interviewed for a podcast about happiness and confidence and all this sort of stuff. And they said, so what does happiness and confidence mean to you? What's the secret to that? He said, well, as far as I can tell, the less concerned you are with how you feel, the more happiness and confidence and well-being you get to experience. And that's been my experience, Will, as I've continued to explore this stuff that we're talking about. The less concerned I am with how I feel, the more quickly the mind self-corrects to whatever you need for the job at hand. I'll give you an example. I was invited to go on Sky Breaking News. This was a couple of years ago. So it was Sky Sports. So it goes out live to about 5.5 million people. And it was on the day that they thought that Andrew Strauss, England cricket captain, was going to resign. And so they brought me on as a state of mind specialist to commentate on Andrew Strauss's resignation and what was going through his head and that sort of thing. So I got the call from Sky, and they're like, do you want to come on and be interviewed live in front of 5.5 million people? And I was like, in my head, I was terrified, and I wanted to say no, but I could see it's a good opportunity. So I was like, yeah, I'll do it. But I'm all bothered and anxious. I'm on my way to the studio. I'm like, oh man, I don't want to do this. They take me into the green room. I'm like, oh man, I felt so uncomfortable, Will. I'm pacing up and down. And there's this guy in the green room with me who was also being interviewed about something or other. And he'd been on TV like 500 times, wasn't nervous at all. So he sees me pacing up and down and sweating and uncomfortable. He goes, how you doing? I'm like, man, not good. He's like, oh, what are you going to do about it? I said, nothing. And he's like, why aren't you going to do anything? I said, well, your mind's a self-correcting system. I said, I don't need to be in a good state of mind right now. I'm in the green room talking to you. I don't need to be in a good state of mind. I need to be in a good state of mind when I'm out there on TV being interviewed. And he's like, well, how are you going to do that? I said, I'm not. It's going to happen. Or it's not. But either way, me getting my fingers in the machinery and trying to meddle with it isn't going to help. So he's like, good luck with that, pal. So anyway, the runner comes to get me and takes me out walks me out onto the set. So I can see Dermot Murnahan sitting there getting ready to interview me. And I thought about it on the way out there. And I'm like, well, what have I got going for me? I was like, well, he's going to be interviewing me. Oh, I didn't mention, well, I know nothing about cricket, right? I grew up in Canada. I know nothing about cricket at all. All I know about is state of mind. So I go, I guess he's going to be interviewing me, so he'll be asking me questions. I guess I better really listen to him and see if I can get a connection with him and come up with good answers. So I sit down across from the guy. He asks me the first question and I answer it. And we do great. We had a great interview. That clarity and presence and clear-headedness emerged when I needed it. Now, if I'd been in there trying to fix it beforehand, who knows what might have happened. But your mind's a self-correcting system. And we have countless examples of that. I saw this great article about Usain Bolt, you know, until recently was the world's fastest runner. And interestingly, before races, all the other sprinters would be doing their pre-race routines, doing mental rehearsal and doing all this stuff. Usain Bolt would be having fun, high-fiving the crowd, joshing around with everyone, that sort of thing. So someone says to him, why don't you do a pre-race routine? Why aren't you doing mental rehearsal and all that other stuff? Usain Bolt said, I find that if I think too much about a race, I don't run so fast. And I thought, that's it exactly. You know, if you look at the domain of sports, Will, you'll see when they interview people who have just put in an extraordinary performance, and they'll say, what were you thinking about while you were doing that? They kind of look off into the distance and they go, nothing. I mean, they're not thinking. Like, we all know this, that we tend to put in our best performances when we got nothing on our mind, when we're in flow states. And what I'm pointing to, Will, is that states of flow and clarity and connection, they're natural emergent functions of the human mind. We all have this capacity. It's there within each one of us. And actually, one of the things that gets in the way of it is trying to engineer it, when actually, you know, it's like if I said, hey, Will, get up and run across your room and back right now, your best bet is to just do it. If you start trying to think about it and think about each step and that sort of thing, you're more likely to trip over. It's your mind is a self-correcting system, and the better you understand how it works, the more you get to benefit from the more you get the benefits of that self-correcting system.
I love it. I've got access to see what's going on in the group, so
I can ask to join if you like. I've got Facebook here.
Yeah, by all means. Yes, it's you've got the link in the chat box there. So there's a few comments just so whilst you're joining in, then and then Ellis or Jody or Nicola, if you could just approve Jamie when he joins. But what
I'm in.
You're in. Fantastic. So yeah, so Charlotte's just saying a bit of a lightning moment when she first heard it from Dylan, who's someone who spoke at one of our events the other week, and hearing it gets really powerful, which was, we're not our body, we're not our thoughts. It's a massive realization that we have so much more control of what we think, which obviously we we're just talking about. Nemain is saying, you don't realize the misunderstanding till it's too late. So how do you change the alignment to impartial vision? How to connect to real facts is the main question, which sort of ties in with what I was going to say of what's your opinion on. So I get that if you overthink, then how do you clear the mind, which is, I think, sort of similar to what she's saying.
Well, so and this may sound a bit weird, but the work I'm doing with clients is to help them understand something that's already true about how life works. And so I don't have anything to offer clients to say, here's what you should do if you're getting stressed before you talk. Oh, can you just mute yourself, Will? Because I'm getting a big feedback loop.
Yeah, sorry, my bad.
No props. So I don't give my clients any practices, any techniques, anything to remember, anything like that. What I do, so this is what I'm doing with this client here over these 3 days, but I do it in my group programs and everything else. What I do is I help create the conditions for them to have a realization, an insight into how their mind already works. Because like I said earlier, we're built for reality. So as soon as our mind understands more deeply how reality works, we upregulate to that. We shift to that. So what I find is that as people see this, as they see the truth of who they are and how their mind works, they just have so much less on their mind. in general. They're so much less likely to get caught out by overthinking, so much less likely to take it seriously. I'll give you an example. When I was first running a training company, so I used to have an NLP training company many years ago, and I had this happen to me many a time. I'd do these 3-day programs, and by the end of 3 days, delivered in a hotel with a group of people doing deep change work, lots of energies moving around and that sort of thing, plus eating not necessarily that healthy hotel food all for every meal for 3 days. By the afternoon of the third day, often I would find myself feeling kind of down. Now, this was bad. I was an NLP trainer. I'm not supposed to be feeling down, right? But I was feeling down. And I'd be like, oh, what are you doing this for? You're no good at this. Or like, I just feel bad. And then I would feel terrible. I'd be like, oh my God, I must be a terrible trainer. I'm such a fraud. How can this be going on? Because I thought it was giving me valuable information about the training course I was running and the clients I was working with, all that, and what a no good shit I was and all that sort of stuff. I didn't realize it's just, for whatever reason, I'd put on a pair of low mood goggles. Very temporary. Like, we all sometimes put on low mood goggles. Now, if you know they're low mood goggles, they just pass. But if you get all up in your head about it, you're in trouble. So sometimes that happens to me these days. I don't do anything about it. And what I find is typically they've moved on within seconds. Like, literally, bad moods that used to stick around with me for days or even weeks now disappear within minutes or even seconds. It's shocking to me. Because, like, if you, again, I keep using the example of little kids, but if you look at toddlers, literally 1 minute they will be freaking out. The next minute they're laughing their heads off. The next minute it's the end of the world. The next minute they're furious. The next minute they're loving and connected. The next minute they're laughing their heads off again. Their moods change like that, like that, like that, like that. And because they're unconcerned about it, they're just having the experience they're having. The system has the freedom to move on. Now, here's what happens, Will. As we grow up, we get convinced that we understand how our psychology works. If you ask anyone, everyone thinks they understand how their own psychology works. So they'll say, oh, well, I'm in a bad mood because it's Monday. Or, oh, I'm feeling down because it's the winter. Or I'm feeling stressed because I've got a talk coming up. So they all think they know what causes those feelings. But in actual fact, it's the most natural thing in the world for our moods to shift and change, because we're always feeling the goggles we're wearing. Not the things we're looking at, the goggles we're wearing. And as people wake up to the truth of that, they find that there's much more fluidity, adaptability, resilience. You know, one of the things we were doing at the Resolving the Roots of Youth Violence workshop was helping people to see that the young people they're working with have the source of resilience and insight and peace of mind within them, and creativity and innovation within them. Because if you see that about your clients just blossom. So helping these youth workers see that is an incredible thing. What's the same with my clients? You know, my clients sit down in front of me and they start telling me about the challenges they've got or the problems. But inside, I'm like, you're fine. You're fine. You're great. I know it. And you're going to see it too soon. So that's the move, really.
So essentially acknowledging that their goggles that they're wearing is and when I think back to myself, it's like, yeah, how many times have I just acknowledged that I am not, as you put, the goggles, but they are the goggles that are on, and then things start to dissipate.
Yeah, it's less about how do I get rid of the stuff that's getting in the way, and more about how do I stop holding on to it. Because our minds they're natural, they're self-clearing systems. Like, if you run up a flight of stairs, your heart's going to be pumping faster, your lungs are going to be taking more oxygen, and you don't think about it, it just happens automatically. So we're used to many bodily processes happening totally automatically without conscious intervention. But for some reason we think that our mind should work differently. But actually you've got so much automatic stuff that's working for you and that's there to help you out and take care of you and give you the best results you can possibly get. All you need is to understand how it works, and it's a game changer.
So there, just to reiterate what Jamie's just said. Alice has said she loves the weather perception, and I think it's so true. I sort of come from the place that the only constant is change. Things are constantly changing. The weather, the seasons, you know, things are constantly changing. So knowing that that cycle is taking.
There's one thing that isn't changing. Who you really are is a constant. Your essence, your beingness, your I would say your consciousness. Your consciousness, the essence of your nature, that is a constant. And when we identify with everything that's changing moment to moment, it's sort of like if who you really are is consciousness, the different moods we have, the different self-identities we have, all that sort of stuff. Those are like Halloween costumes that we're putting on. Like 1 minute we're putting on a Incredible Hulk Halloween costume. The next minute we're putting on a Little Bo Peep Halloween costume. That's sure a weird image. Next minute we're putting on a, you know, depressed Halloween costume or a happy or excited Halloween costume. If you identify with the Halloween costume, then that you're going to be like getting shaken around like a rag doll by life. It's going to be a wild ride. But if you see that who you actually are isn't any of those Halloween costumes, you're the one who's wearing it. You're the one who's wearing it. You're the one who's experiencing it. You're that consciousness that's having an experience of life, that's going on the ride. And it turns life from kind of from a runaway train into a roller coaster. I love roller coasters. Don't like the idea of being on a runaway train. That's the difference when you realize that who you really are is not of this world of things and activities and that sort of thing. It's the one that's experiencing them. Then you realize that who you really are isn't vulnerable to anything from this world. And that's what unlocks the potential for courage, for boldness, for taking steps, doing what you know is right. As you realize that you can't be hurt by anything in this world, and you can't be helped by it. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can certainly get hurt by crocodiles and steamrollers and things like that. Your physical body can, but who you really are isn't these things. Who you really are is the consciousness that's experiencing it. And as you see that, everything becomes more of a game, more fun, more. And the funny thing is, Will, as you see that, it allows you to throw yourself even more fully into life, to jump off that cliff into the canyon, Kelly, to really go for it, because as you recognize, and it's not about being foolhardy or dangerous. You know, I'm all in favor of taking care of your physical body, but as you realize that who you really are can't be harmed by anything that happens in this world, it gives you a freedom and a power and a boldness to engage fully with the adventure of life and enjoy it to the full.
Just join a couple of those notes down. What you just said there is a really powerful statement. Who you really are can't be harmed by anything in this world. I think having that as a global belief is a powerful belief to live by, for sure.
Well, and here's the cool thing. Remember I said, Will, that we have an innate capacity for realization and insight? How I think about it, well, let me grab something. I'm going to show you something. You've probably seen this before. It's a very cheesy analogy, but I like it. Just a sec.
you do have any other questions, go through all the questions in a second. So feel free to post any other questions you've got, guys.
So I'm going to show you a cheesy analogy. Can the people who are tuned in, can they see the screen? Oh, I can't hear you, buddy. You're on mute.
Screen.
Sorry, can people see the screen if I show something?
Screen to show.
Or will everyone be in the Facebook group?
There will be, the majority will be in the Facebook group for sure, yeah. And if they're not, then they can see you currently, but I can give them access to your.
Oh well, here we go. That's fine. So this is a cheesy example. So this is the Fedex logo. So yeah, I've got an echo again, buddy. If you can mute yours. So this is the Fedex logo. You've probably seen this example. It's used by 1 million motivational speakers worldwide of the arrow in the Fedex logo. So there's an arrow right there, a big white arrow right between the E and the X in the Fedex logo. Now, I'm using this cheesy, well-worn analogy. There's also a spoon actually in the E. I don't know if you can see that in the bottom of the E, in the middle of the word fed, so quite poetic. But I use this in a different way, which is that arrow that's right there, it has always been part of the reality of the logo. It's always been there in reality. But to go from not seeing the arrow to seeing it, you have to have an insight. You have to have a realization. A realization is realizing something that's already true about reality. Seeing. So when we have a realization, our perceptions are brought more closely into alignment with what's already true. Now, this will sound strange, perhaps, but I'm not interested in helping people make empowering beliefs. I don't care about people's beliefs. In fact, I would rather they have no beliefs, because I think what's going to be far more useful for anyone than empowering beliefs is having their perceptions be more closely aligned with reality. And so I don't suggest anything that people should think, or I don't do any belief change exercises. I don't say you should believe this and not that or anything like that. I just point as best I can at reality. And I go, and again, this arrow is just a metaphor, but I point with my clients, I point at their capacity for well-being, their capacity for resilience, their capacity for mental clarity, their capacity for peace and well-being, their capacity for courage and boldness. I just point at it and I go, it's there, it's there. And at first, like with the arrow, some people go, oh, no, it's not there. I'm like, yeah, it is. It's there. It's there. Like I've literally had people, Will, who go, I can't see the arrow. I don't think I have the power to see it. It's like, sure you do. Sure you do. Everyone does. It's right there. It's right there. See, it's right there. It's right there. You can see it. And sooner or later they go, oh, they don't just do that with the arrow. They do it with the stuff that's true about every human being. And see, here's the thing. When you discover something that's true about human beings, you don't just discover it for yourself. You discover it for everyone else as well. So in my work I teach a lot of coaches and therapists, and this is a game changer for them, because once they see it, once they see the truth of this in their clients, all of a sudden they're just way more hopeful about their ability to make a difference to people. People pick up on it. They pick up on that hopefulness. You know, sometimes I've got 2 daughters. Sometimes people say, how do you talk to your children about this? And I'm like, I don't. I just see the truth of it in them, and they pick up on that. So yeah, I'd say even better than empowering beliefs is having your perceptions brought ever more fully into alignment with the truth of how life really works. Because, you know, the old saying, if you ever see someone in a fight with reality, put your money on reality. So guys, I guessed as much, Charlotte. I can see the Facebook group. So if you want to ask me any more questions, go for it. I'm at your service until we're done. given that nothing is real or matters. I never said that, Paul. So I don't it doesn't seem to me that nothing is real, and it doesn't seem to me that nothing matters. It seems to me that there are all kinds of things that are real and that matter. All I'm pointing to is that one of the things that's real is that there's a way that our experience is created. And if you understand how it's created, it actually unlocks way more purpose and direction and inspiration and motivation and all of that. So I know you may have interpreted what I said, Paul, as nothing is real and nothing matters, but that's absolutely not my belief. I find that there are great reasons to do all kinds of things. The reason I'm doing this tonight is I love doing this. I love sharing what I'm seeing with people. I love it. It's wonderful to do this. And in my own life, I experience more love and connection and enjoyment of life in the average week than I used to in the average year. So it seems that, if anything, speaking personally, I have far more that matters in my life than I used to. And I see the same thing with my clients. So, Paul, I know it'll sound strange, but it's actually the exact opposite of the conclusion you've drawn. So Margaret had a question, which is, how do you balance taking action or making it happen with the mind as a self-correcting system and not to engineer as it gets in the way? Well, Margaret, I think in the world of stuff, it's a great idea to take action and make things happen. So I take a lot of action. I do all kinds of things. I create products. I build programs. I write books. I promote books. I do all kinds of stuff. In the world of stuff, doing things is the best way of getting shit done, in my experience. I'm talking about between your ears, though. Your mind is a self-correcting system. So what I'm pointing to is that you already have an overlooked but powerful capacity for living a beautiful life. And so when I saying you don't need to do anything, I'm saying you don't need to do anything to control your thinking. Like, I'm not trying to control my thoughts or manage my thoughts or any of that. I'm not really paying too much attention to all that stuff. I'm relatively unconcerned with it. In the world of stuff, I'm all in favor of doing stuff and taking action and making things happen. You know, I'm doing a launch at the moment, and it involves taking tons of action and doing lots of stuff. I'm all in favor of it. It's a great way of creating results in the world. It's not, but what you find is that that's the difference, I guess. In the world of like business and doing things and getting results, the real world results are a function to some degree of action and effort. Whereas your mind clearing is not a function of action and effort. It's a function of a self-correcting system. The only thing you need to do to get a self-correcting system to do its thing is not interfere with it. Margaret, I'm glad that made sense. Thanks. Any other questions? Charlotte's asked, do I have any audio downloads? I've got some podcasts you could listen to. So there's loads of audio stuff there. Just a sec. Let me see if it's okay for me to share links. So here's a link. I assume it is. Just a sec. Here's a link to a bunch of episodes of my podcast. I've just put it in the thread where you asked Charlotte. So yeah, hopefully you'll enjoy that. Any other questions? I can.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I'm hoping if you can. Apologies about that. The computer decided it was to play funny games. So I think I jumped in and you were just answering Paul's question. I think you've answered Margaret's question, and I think all the other ones, Charlotte's, yeah, we've covered that. So what was the other question I was going to have for you? So one of the other questions from what we were speaking about earlier was that obviously having an NLP background, and obviously a lot of NLP is very much around state and states change, state management. But in your opinion, you were talking about the time when you're in the green room and you were just like, well, I'm just going to go out there and do what I'm going to do. You didn't do anything to change your state. You didn't use any form of anchor or anything like that to change your state.
No, sir. No, I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I don't. So here's the thing, Will. Here's how it looks to me. If I had tried to change for all, like, remember I said the mind's a self-correcting system. Well, I know that. I know that. So I know that all I need to do to benefit from a self-correcting system is keep my fingers out of the machinery, and it'll do its thing. But what that means, there's a flip side to it. It means I have to be willing to feel uncomfortable. So it means spending with something like that, or going and doing a talk or whatever. It means if I want to get the benefits of the self-correcting system and enjoying wisdom showing up in the moment and enjoying all the interview, I'll share it with you. I was less beardy and heavier at the time, but I'll show you the interview. You can judge for yourself. And here's the funny thing. I'll share a couple of them with you. And what you'll see is a guy, me, who knows nothing about sports, talking about sports, basically. We're talking about state of mind in sports. I'll share him in the group later. I can't find him right now. And I wouldn't have been like, what state should you be in to be interviewed about a subject where you know almost nothing about it? What state should you be in? I didn't even know what the right state for that was. I thought, you know what I need is total mental clarity and the ability to come up with just the right answer to just the right question that I don't know what it is yet at just the right time. So I thought, to do that, what do I need? I need to be listening to the interviewer. I need to be feeling connected to the interviewer, connected to who I really am, connected to the intelligence and wisdom of life, because otherwise it'll be a train wreck. Well, that's not a state. That's just an absence of contaminated thinking. And there's nothing you can do to clear your mind of contaminated thinking. You got to let it clear itself. And the leverage point for benefiting from that is getting a better understanding of how the system works. That's all you need. I'll give you a simple example to finish on. So if you stop and think about it for a moment, like, because what I'm pointing to, Will, is facts of life, facts of how our minds work. So if you stop and think about it, you have already an embodied understanding of gravity. And you've used your embodied understanding of the implications of gravity 1,000 times this week. Every time you sat up, got up, sat down, walked up the stairs, drove your car, anything like that, you're using your embodied understanding of the implications of gravity. Not only that, you're using them without even thinking about it. They're running automatically. I bet you haven't thought much about gravity this week, but you've used your embodied understanding of the implication of gravity 1,000 times. Okay, so that first example. Second example, germs. Now, for most of human history, nobody knew that there was a link between germs and infection. However, that link got discovered in the 1800s. And so when we were little kids, we got taught about germs. Specifically, we got taught to hallucinate germs. And by getting taught to hallucinate something that is actually invisible to our naked eye, we got the benefit of an embodied understanding of germs, which we all have. And so again, you've probably used that embodied understanding 100 times this week. Every time you washed your hands, every time you didn't eat a sandwich because it had been on the floor or whatever, that's used your embodied understanding of the fact of germs. And you did that automatically without even thinking about it. Well, what I'm pointing to is that just like gravity, just like germs, there are some facts about how our minds work. And like gravity, they're pre-existing facts, but like germs, they're invisible. And so my job is to point them out to people, to point at them until people see them for themselves. And when they do, they get an embodied understanding of it, and then they benefit from that understanding. Just like you've benefited 1,000 times this week from gravity, the understanding gravity without having to think about it. I've benefited 1,000 times this week from an embodied understanding of how my mind works and who I really am without even thinking about it. And that's what I rely on. That's what I teach my clients to rely on. And what it leaves them with is a lot less on their mind and a lot more freedom to enjoy life and have a good time and kick ass. So yeah, that's the shiz. You're still on mute, buddy. Well, I wish I could lip read, because then I could say what you're saying so everyone could hear it, but I can't. If you type in what you want to say, I'll say it for you. I'll stand in for you. Just for everyone who's listening, Will's sound system has crashed, so he's gonna type stuff in, and I'm gonna say it. I may be thanking myself very much, or I may be telling you all to pay no attention to what I've said because it's nonsense. We'll see. We'll see what Will types in. I will be his faithful raconteur one way or another. Will says, I haven't had much luck with tech tonight. Oh, I can hear you again. Your sound just came on.
Working?
Yeah. Don't know how that happened.
Okay, well, yeah, I don't know what happened. So, yeah, I'm hoping everybody that's been on, I want to say a huge thank you, Jamie. See them really clarity. Question, I definitely think that we're getting into this stage where it start getting the things where the contamination start to remove those thoughts or that way of thinking to get the true clarity and the confidence, which obviously we've been speaking about this evening. So a huge thank you. So for people that would like to find out more about you and learn more about you and what it is that you do, where can they find you?
So they can go to jamiesmart.com, which is my website. All the usual social places. My handle is jamiesmartcom. So jamiesmartcom on Snapchat, on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, and then on LinkedIn, I'm Jamie Smart Clarity.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And I believe I'm right in saying that you're going to post the podcast. If you haven't already, they'll be posted so people can listen to the podcast, and also the interview that you did. So if anybody's wanting to learn how to interview, not having any idea of what the subject is about, then they can learn from modeling you in that respect.
Yeah, and what you'll see once I find those and post them, I've posted a couple of things, but I'll find the interview. I kept the interview to what I did know about, which is state of mind, rather than all the things I didn't know about, like football and cricket and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, thanks, Will.
Thank you very much, Jamie. It's been an absolute pleasure, and yeah, look forward to speaking again at some point again in the future.
Looking forward to it, Will. All the best, and thanks for all the questions, everybody.
All the best. Take care.
Bye.